danger.
Greetings, travellers, and welcome to episode 103 of the Innsmouth Book Club. Once again, as you can see, we've brought you to the faded splendour of the Gilman Hotel because we have an esteemed guest visiting Innsmouth this week. Do you think it's the spring weather? It's easier to get through the marshes now. Everything's warming up a bit.
I think that must be it, yeah.
Yeah. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Poyton.
And I'm the other one, Tim Mendes. Yes, spring is in the air in Innsmouth, which is very, very disturbing. But before we take you into the hotel and go up to the room to see our guest, I believe you've got a little bit of news for us. I see that you've been buying things again, haven't you, Rob?
I have, yes. You know, it's one of those situations where you think, no, I've got all the figures I need, I've got all the model stuff I need. But then I had a table at the Bedford Tabletop Gaming Expo a couple of weeks back, and the stall next to me was some guys from XWC Minis and also Moonbeast Games, who have produced a really outstanding range of Mythos miniatures. So they've got Moonbeasts and Night Gaunts and Investigators, but pride of place was a Star Spawn of Cthulhu, which stands about 10 inches tall, and I just thought, yeah, I need that one. I'm not sure what I need it for, but I do need it.
Is this one of them ones where you're going to be hiding the bill when it comes through?
This is why I have a shed. So you know, it's a bit like all the music here. It goes straight into the shed, and then I break the news gently later on. But yeah, I'm just putting that together and painting it, and I'll be putting all that up on my YouTube channel at Dragon's Teeth. So I'll put a link to that up in the show notes below. And I'm also pleased to say that XWC Minis are going to be one of the traders you can see at the Innsmouth Literary Festival this year. They've booked their place there, and tickets are now on sale for that event, September the 27th in Bedford. Of course, we'll put the link up below, and there are some trader spaces left as well, but we're pleased to say that half of them have gone already. I think a lot of our people have come back from last year, haven't they?
Yeah, it's nice to see people returning. We've got some very exciting things in the pipeline, actually, but we can't make any real announcements at the moment, but do watch this space.
And one other thing I just quickly wanted to mention, listeners with a long memory may remember that last year I said I was starting a new series of novellas, well, a trilogy of novellas that are a sequel basically to Robert E. Howard's Worms of the Earth. Well, I've actually now finished the first draft of Volume 1, Queen of the Fens. It's taken somewhat longer than usual. We just had so many projects on this year. But yeah, the first draft is finished now. So I'm looking hopefully to get that out probably June time. As I say, it's a sequel to Worms of the Earth, and it's a Frumentari, a Roman military investigator being sent over to investigate the disappearance of Titus Sulla, the governor, who those of you who have read Worms of the Earth, of course, will know what happened to him. But yeah, so do keep an eye out for that.
Nice.
Okay, enough news. Let's tread upstairs to room 428, shall we? And here's our guest. We're delighted to welcome Mr. James Lovegrove. Hello, James. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm not convinced about this room. It's kind of a bit run down, and I can hear voices through the walls at the moment. And they're not speaking English.
We like to call it shabby chic in Innsmouth.
Shabby chic, yeah.
I take it this is your first visit then to the fine old seaport.
I was touring the area doing some sort of genealogical research, and I sort of caught the bus into this town because apparently I have family sort of embedded here at some point in my past. There was an old man telling me not to come, but here I am nonetheless. And I'm getting very uncomfortable, and there's a sort of weird fishy smell in the air as well that I just can't seem to get away from.
Yeah, we would call that the Innsmouth tang, don't we?
Yeah, you might want to take the little lock off the trouser press and put it on the door.
Well, I've noticed my fingers are becoming a bit webbed as well. So.
Although that happens to the best of us.
Yeah, especially in my part of the world, but we won't get into that. Now, you've got a tremendous output. I believe it's over 50 books you've got out across several genres.
It's actually, that's more like 70. I'm about to start my 71st book.
Wow.
But in my defense, I have been writing professionally since I was 22. So that was 37 years ago. So
my word.
You spread it out across that, it's not so much. But yeah, I have about 2 or 3 books out every year. just because it beats having a job, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So perhaps we can go back then to the very beginning. Could you let us know something about your background, and in particular how you first got into weird fiction and Lovecraft and all that good stuff?
Well, absolutely. I've always been attracted to science fiction, weird fiction, horror from a very young age. And I came to Lovecraft relatively late. I think I was probably in my teens. I'd heard of him beforehand. And I'll tell you how I'd heard of him. It's like the odd way around, because a lot of Marvel comics from the 1970s, and I'm a massive Marvel fan, had Lovecraftian elements in them. I think they were largely, it was writers like Roy Thomas and Steve Englehart used to introduce them into, particularly into Doctor Strange, I think. There was, Marvel has its own old one called Shumagorath. And they also have the many angled ones who are basically the great old ones. And they have the Darkhold, which is their Necronomicon. So all these elements were there. And I didn't really understand. I knew there was something else going on here. I could see there was a game being played. And I had sort of heard of Lovecraft at that age. But then I think I was in my mid-teens when I came across you'll know this, there's a Grafton 3-volume paperback edition.
Yep.
With these wonderful, seething, glossy, horrible, gory covers. I think the artist is called Tim White.
Yeah.
They were brilliant. And I got all 3 of those straight away. And I started reading them and I thought, this is great. And this is also very hard to read, because Lovecraft's prose is, as we all know, famously sort of knotty and ornamental and slightly old-fashioned. So it took me a while to actually sort of and get into the swing of them. But once I was there, I understood why everyone was like going mad about Lovecraft. And in the intervening 40-odd years, Lovecraft's popularity has become much more prevalent, and now it's everywhere. Games, board games, fiction, movies, it's all over the place. So I think even back then in the sort of, I'm talking about the early 80s here, it was still kind of niche, but it was starting to grow. And I don't have those 3 Grafton paperbacks anymore, because there was a weird accident involving glue that I still don't quite understand. To this day, I have no idea what happened. So at least I hope it was glue. It might have been some eldritch substance that had leaked.
Protoplasm. Shoggoth spawn or something. Yeah.
At last I had to throw those away. But I've now got, for instance, I am sitting here with the Necronomicon, which is one of the collections edited by Steve Jones. That is, it's a lovely collection, and I was thumbing through it this morning and having a great old time.
Funnily enough, we were talking about Steve Jones recently, weren't we, with the Innsmouth collections, the 3 Innsmouth anthologies?
Yes, Weird Shadows, Weirder Shadows, Weirder Shadows, or whatever it is.
Weirdest Shadows of all.
Yeah, Dark Detectives is one of my favourites that he did. Because it's all like things like Carnacki, modern stories of like Carnacki and Sherlock Holmes and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that sounds great. I'll have to see that, because I love Carnacki as well.
Yeah, it's got some good stuff in it.
So you mentioned the time there, the early 80s. That was when the RPGs really started up as well, or at least Call of Cthulhu. Was that something you were involved in back then?
I'm afraid not. No, I didn't. I am a massive board game player now. I've got a hideous number of them. And again, it's something that my wife doesn't, I wouldn't say she doesn't know about, she knows about, but I try to keep from her.
Doesn't know the extent. Yeah.
But no, I didn't. I wasn't really into RPGs or D&D back then. But I funny, you just reminded me, there was in the sort of 70s and 80s, there was a bookshop in Tottenham Court Road in London called Lovecraft. And
yes,
we've discussed this before.
Fair enough. Say no more. I just remember the shock I felt going downstairs there the first time, because on the ground floor it's like a lovely bookshop, secondhand books. Browse away to your heart's content. Just don't go down to the basement.
Yeah, what we call the cold print room, isn't it?
Yes. After Ramsey Campbell, yeah, the cold print room. Yeah.
So, were you you were writing from a young age? Then I take it was that something you sort of got into at school, kind of thing?
Absolutely, it was. I did short stories just for fun, and plays, and I had comic strips and all sorts of things, and also magazines at school. I was doing a lot of those, just filling paper with words. And whenever you would get an English composition not a test, whatever, someone, one of the teachers would go, write a story on this subject or that, I would go, whoa, absolutely, I'm off here. This is why is this schoolwork? This is fun. But it wasn't until I was in university, I was reading English literature, and in my final term, I think I'd just done my exams, and I was talking to my tutor, and he said, well, what are you going to do when you graduate, when you leave? And I said, well, I don't know, but I'm thinking of writing a novel. And he said, well, darling, you must do that. And that's all it took. All it took was this little word of encouragement from someone who I respected. So I that very summer wrote my first book in the space of about 6 weeks, and it was sold to a publisher within a month. And whenever I tell that story, every author in the world is probably wanting to flush my head down the toilet.
Yes.
Seething.
Yeah, you could probably hear my little low growl in the back of my throat.
And deservedly so. It was a different time. This was like 1988. You didn't need an agent in those days necessarily to get published. Publishing was a whole different game. And I acknowledge how incredibly lucky I was. But that was my first book, The Hope, which came out in 1990, and I haven't really looked back since.
I don't know, it sort of parallels, you probably agree, Tim, with the music business as well, that you had the rise of the independent back in those days. There was a certain amount of do-it-yourself attitude going on, I think, for music and fanzines and publishing. But I suppose back then self-publishing was pretty much impossible, wasn't it?
Oh, I absolutely. Whereas nowadays, and the same with music as well. Nowadays, you can make music in your bedroom and put it on SoundCloud or wherever. Yeah. And the same with publishing, absolutely. So it was still, it was very much trad publishing. There wasn't much in the way of small press and independent. I mean, there was here and there, but different times.
So how do you then get from that into writing? I mean, let's start with the Sherlock Holmes. I mean, that's a huge literary figure.
Yes.
Did you start as a fan fiction kind of thing, or how did that work?
Everything I write that's in someone else's intellectual property is, as far as I'm concerned, professional fan fiction. I do it because I love the characters or the world or whatever. And in the case of Sherlock Holmes, again, I mean, I read those when I was quite young, 11, 12, something like that. And then about 13, 14 years ago, I saw that Titan Books had started producing new Sherlock Holmes adventures, including a couple by a guy who's now a friend of mine, Guy Adams, which I really, really enjoyed. And both of those had slight fantastical elements. And I read those, loved them, and I thought, hang on, I want to have a go at this myself, because I've always loved Sherlock Holmes. And so Guy introduced me to the editor, and I pitched to her. Actually, it wasn't Guy, it was someone else. I'm so sorry. But I was introduced to the editor. I pitched her a couple of stories, and it went from there. And I have now published 13 Sherlock Holmes books, or Sherlock Holmes adjacent books, as I'm sure we're going to come to in a minute. And when I started, yes, famous literary canon, much loved by millions and millions of people. And my approach has always been to try and give people more of what they love, but with something slightly different attached to it. So there's something new. But I was very conscious about recreating Conan Doyle's language, sticking as true to the characters, particularly those of Holmes and Watson, as I could, and not doing anything that Conan Doyle himself would not have done. Stretching, because Conan Doyle did write sort of fantastical stories as well. So I think that's legitimate.
Yes.
But by and large, it was just create more Sherlock Holmes adventures, more of what I loved, and hopefully other people would love it too.
Yeah, there seems to have been quite a boon of it over the last few years, because I know famously there was a problem with rights, wasn't there, for a long time, which is why August Derleth created Solar Ponds, which is it's basically Sherlock Holmes with a daft name. But so when that was relaxed, there's quite a big explosion of it. But like you just alluded to there, it's gone in sort of strange directions as well, which brings us really nicely to the meat and potatoes of what we're here for today, to your Cthulhu case books. And how did that idea come about?
Well, what happened was that my editor at Titan at the time is an amazing woman called Miranda Jewis. got in touch with me and said, do you know someone who could write a Sherlock Holmes H.P. Lovecraft crossover? So
Nice.
I duly made a list of people I thought could do it. And by that point, I'd read Shadows over Baker Street, which, among other things, contains Neil Gaiman's A Study in Emerald, which I thought was, it was certainly the best story in that collection. But there's a lot of good stuff in it. So I was busy suggesting names and things like that. And then Miranda said to me, "No, you stupid idiot. I'm asking if you can do it." So this is just not reading the subtext here. And at that point, I thought, no, I can't, because this is not possible. A, because it's already been sort of done. And B, if you're looking at it chronologically, Holmes and Lovecraft do not cross over, because essentially Holmes's career ends with the First World War. And then Lovecraft's stories are more or less, not all of them, more or less after 20s and 30s. So they're contemporaries for that. So it would be very difficult to try and marry the two. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, actually, it's possible, because there are so many elements in the Cthulhu mythos that predate Lovecraft's stories. It wouldn't be too difficult to sort of to draw on those and set it in Victorian times, late Victorian times, early Edwardian. And then I think the most cunning idea I came up with was just coming up with the idea that Watson has actually, all his published stories are essentially sanitized versions of what really happened, and what really happened is unnameable monstrosities and things that cannot be described, etc., etc. He was presenting to the public these bowdlerized versions of Sherlock Holmes's adventures, and the stories I was going to tell through Watson is the real stuff. So I thought that's the way in, and then I thought, let's just spread. The first trilogy is spread across Holmes's career from pretty much from start to finish. And then I did a fourth one that kind of also spans that period and interleaves with the first three, but is also an independent story.
I really like that framing device of you being the discoverer, because again, to me, that was very Lovecraftian, that one step removed sometimes, or M.R. James kind of approach. It strengthens the atmosphere of the stories. But it's something we've spoken about a lot as well, that particular era and setting, Victorian London, for ghost, supernatural, weird, whatever you call it, it's ripe, isn't it? It just seems right for that.
Yeah. Yes, where there's fog, there will be lurking monstrosities.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like the little bits that you've thrown in there. I can't remember which one it is. It might be the Sussex Sea Devils, where you've got the note saying that James Lovegrove went mad after transcribing.
Well, you can't end a Lovecraftian story without someone getting mad.
No, exactly. Yeah, I just thought that was like the cherry on it for me. I was just like, oh, that's brilliant. That's great. So break that fourth wall,
Well, I think that was you're right about that having that framing sequence of me receiving these manuscripts from some American lawyer, because I felt that, as you say, that's very Lovecraftian. His style is very much sort of reportage, anecdotal, it's slightly journalistic as well, and it creates that distance between the storyteller and the story they're telling, so that you can also have the balance between, is this person have they actually seen genuine horrible things that they cannot describe, or are they just mad?
Yes.
And I think, that's the tension that works a lot in a lot of Lovecraft stories. And I was kind of playing on that a bit with the Cthulhu case books as well.
I wanted to ask how much research you had to do this, because it strikes me there's a few threads here. One, you've got to know your Holmes inside out in terms of sequence and of the stories and everything. Then there's the historical research, of course, and I like the way you pepper in all these terms, things I had to look up, or sort of put in real people in there and that kind of thing. But then also, how much research did you have to do in terms of the mythos as well? Because although it's not, the mythos has never been something set in stone, but by the same token, there are sort of edges to it. You can't colour outside of the line too much, perhaps. So how much research was involved?
Well, in the case of Holmes, by that point, I'd written probably about 6 or 7 other Holmeses. So I was already familiar with the material and the timelines and everything, and quite immersed in that. So that wasn't a problem. With Lovecraft, you're absolutely right. There are many people's interpretations. There are many sort of offshoots in different directions. I think August Derleth has, tried to codify it a little bit too much and turned it into a sort of war between good and evil, which is not really where Lovecraft is coming on from. Because for a start, that sort of goes against cosmicism and suggests that there is actually some kind of qualitative force of good and qualitative force of evil. And of course, the actual truth is the universe does not care a shit about any of us, and that's much more fun. So I had to restrict myself quite closely to only stuff that Lovecraft himself wrote. None of his sort of none of the offshoot stuff. And it was differentiating between the two is not always easy, because there's a thing called the internet, and out there's a lot of misinformation on this place. So if you're using the internet for your homework, which I did to a certain extent, but I also read a lot of sort of, scholarship as well. But if you're using the internet, you do have to be very, very careful about what your sources are and how faithful they are to the originals. But as with Holmes, so I did with Lovecraft, I just tried to stick to just the original works and navigate my way through the maze, just because that's what people would expect. And with my Holmes books, if you make a mistake, there are lots of fans out there who are very, very happy to point out. So it is with Lovecraft as well. So you do have to. Yeah. It's not you have to be careful like it's a minefield. You just have to be careful because you want to be respectful to what people know and love, and not piss them off.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think we do find that the Lovecraft crowd tends to be fairly forgiving. I mean,
yes,
like we often say, if you stray into Middle Earth, then you better have your suit of armour on. You better be very well prepared for that.
Yeah.
The worst one I had was actually World War II buffs. And because I had a story set during the Second World War, and I mentioned the wrong flywheel in an engine. It was the wrong dimensions, apparently, and I had all hell to pay for that.
Absolutely, yeah. I think and the historical stuff as well. I'm quite lazy on that front, so I will only look up the things that I know I'm about to reference, and then rather than doing huge amounts. I'll tell you, we might talk about this later. When I did an El Borak story for Titan, who are doing the heroic signatures, Robert E. Howard stuff, that did require quite a bit of homework because I wanted to get the historical background right. But I tend to be, as I say, somewhat lazy otherwise, and just go for I only need this. What's that? What's Wikipedia got to say about it?
But it's that thing, you just drop in a couple of things. I never knew what Tollaware was, for example, or words like encomium. Just those, it's almost like Clark Ashton's Smithy, which obviously we're big fans of as well. Just those old obscure words. I don't know, again, it just adds to the atmosphere, I think.
Yeah.
I do love long obscure words, I have to say. I have a tendency to try and avoid those because not everyone's happy about them, but every so often it doesn't hurt to just throw in something that if people want to find out about it, they can look it up. I do love the language.
Yeah, I agree. There's something I always like about it is the phrases that you find, especially in Victorian London. Things like smothering the parrot and things like that, for having a glass of absinthe.
Oh, okay, good, because I thought it was something else.
I was going somewhere else with that as well.
Yeah. Now, smothering the parrot is having a glass of absinthe. Right. It's something I've used. I've used that for years since I discovered that one.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, the Victorian slang is quite interesting in its own.
Yeah.
But that goes back to Lovecraft again, because he was very much a fan of British English rather than American English, and old-fashioned British English as well, which you can see in his prose. And I think that might partly explain why such words as squamous and glaucous, reoccur quite often in his stories. And again, that was something I was at pains. I had to use the word glaucous at least once in every book, and squamous as much as I could get.
Nice.
Cyclopean makes an appearance as well, of course. You got it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and non-Euclidean geometry.
Is there a gibbous moon in there at one point as well?
Oh, I hope so, yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a gibbous moon in at least one of them.
One of my favourite things was something you invented as well, which was the microphone.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I like that one.
I don't want to go into spoilers too much on the actual story, but that was, wow, I thought that was great.
Well, I think one of the things that I tasked myself with the Cthulhu case books was if Sherlock Holmes was actually investigating supernatural things and weird things, he would take a scientific approach to it in the same way that he took a scientific approach towards criminology. And therefore, he would try and, come up with things that utilized or negated the horrors that he was facing in order to further his goals, i.e. defeating the old ones and the general forces of squamous evil.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I mean, that's something that, well, I don't know if this is something I just picked up on or something that you actually put in, was almost Holmes as Lovecraft. There was a line that describes Holmes as a solitary ascetic, a creature of intellect. And I thought it's something that could be applied to HPL as well. I wondered if you saw parallels between their characters.
Not until you just mentioned it. And when you just mentioned it, I think that's absolutely spot on. Yeah. And Lovecraft did kind of retreat from the world.
Yeah.
He tried to enter the world and he got married and he went to New York and that all went horribly wrong. So he did then sort of withdraw. And Holmes, in the same way, was, as you say, is ascetic and quite solo. And Lovecraft was a very intelligent man, quite clearly. So I've never thought of that way before. That is an interesting parallel.
Yeah, that scientific, very materialist approach.
Yeah.
Because even with that idea of the microphone, that's using, well, people will say monsters, but it's alien tech.
Yeah. Well, again, no spoilers, but there is, yeah.
Yeah, but one thing I liked about it as well, because I've read quite a lot, because I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. And so I've seen all the adaptations and I've read a lot of the fiction. And some of them can be very, very dry. Some of the like other authors. But what I liked about it was there was little threads of humor in it that really brought it to life. Like, there's one scene that's always stuck with me. Again, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but it involves a revolver and someone dead and a sigil or something. And that has always stuck with me because it really made me laugh out loud when I was reading it. So see if you can do it all without reloading.
I do like a bit of humour, and I also feel that there is an intrinsic humour in the Holmes-Watson relationship, yes, particularly because Holmes is an unbearable human being, and Watson somehow bears him, and I think he does it by being quite sort of he's used to Holmes's weird ways, but also he likes him, so that he can slightly take the mickey out of him without Holmes either knowing or caring. In the same way that, Holmes is kind of brutal towards Watson when Watson is being particularly silly or dunce-ish. And Watson will take it because he knows that it sort of comes from a place of love. There is a very strong friendship between those two. And I never for a moment think it anything more than that. I do not like shipping Holmes and Watson at all. They are just such good friends that they can put up with each other's eccentricities and failings and still retain a sort of a strong foundation of closeness. That with a good friend, you can take the piss out of each other. You can banter. It's great, and I've always sort of felt that's something I wanted to sort of play into.
It's a very British thing as well, isn't it? That
Yes.
Oh yeah.
It's like someone. I think it was a Dave Allen sketch I remember seeing once about in America. They go, "Hey, buddy, hey, you're not seeing you for years in England. Oh, you old wanker."
Yeah.
It's the classic Billy Connolly thing as well, wasn't it? It was like, if we like you, we're insulting you. It's when we stop insulting you that you've got to worry.
And the only time you ever tell your friend you love them is when you're horribly, horribly drunk.
Yes.
You mentioned Elborak, of course, one of Robert E. Howard's characters, historical fiction characters. And I understand you've recently written a new Conan novel as well for Titan. Is that the latest Conan one they've brought out?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Conan, Cult of the Obsidian Moon. And it ties into, although it's a standalone Conan adventure, it ties into the current comics that Jim Zub is writing.
Oh, Jim Zub, right.
Yeah, for Titan. I mean, it sort of tangentially relates to it. That's because Titan asked me to. Basically, when I learned that Titan was starting to do new Robert E. Howard prose, I asked who I had to kill to be given the opportunity to join.
Absolutely.
As you would, yeah.
Because Conan, again, I mean, that was something I was reading when I was 11 or 12, like Sherlock Holmes, and have, loved consistently ever since. And again, that was something that came to you via Marvel as well, because I read the Roy Thomas, Barry Windsor Smith comics.
Oh, yeah.
Before I actually read the books, because the books weren't very readily available until, I don't know, I can't remember when I bought the Sphere paperbacks with Frank Frazetta covers. I bought the first 6 in one go. I got a book token from my grandmother, and I loved those. And so childhood dream come true when I actually get the opportunity to write one myself. And as we all know, Howard and Lovecraft were friends and correspondents, although they never met in real life. And I imagine if they had met in real life, they probably would not have got on, because two less alike people you cannot imagine.
Yeah.
Because, you know, here you've got this sort of reserved New Englander and then this sort of ebullient, you know, two-fisted Texan. And yet they found, I mean, they love to debate in the letters, but also they've got a lot in common.
Indeed. Yeah.
And it's a lovely thing. So there is that. And I certainly, in my Conan novel, there are some Lovecraftian elements as well, because why not? And as there are Lovecraftian elements in the original Conan stories too.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you find any particular challenges? I mean, so you've already taken on Conan Doyle and Lovecraft, and now Robert E. Howard. Is that like a shift in mindset to get into that space?
Again, not too much, but it's the case that when one reads these sort of things avidly at a certain age, they kind of soak in very deeply.
Yeah.
So that then when I first started writing Sherlock Holmes, I was thinking, I can't do this. And suddenly I found, actually, it's all there. It's just been lurking inside. And the same to a certain extent with Howard. The trick with Howard is not to try and copy his prose too slavishly, because that way madness lies. But just to use sort of certainly speech patterns that he would use for the characters, and the occasional word here and there that's distinctively Howard-esque. But mostly just to try and make it as authentic to the spirit of the originals more than the letter of the originals. And that was my approach. So, you know, some of the reviews sort of did object to the fact that it wasn't the prose wasn't like Howard's. But I'm going, you know, only a fool would attempt that. And people have and come a cropper as a result. I think the thing is just to be honest and go, I am going to do my take on Conan and his world and these characters, but I am going to try, certainly, you know, chronologically it fits into the original Conan timeline, and also just be, as I said, true to the spirit of Howard and his philosophy and the things that Conan and more broadly Conan's world, the Hyborian Age, represented for Howard.
Yeah.
I think as long as you get the characters right and the settings right, I mean, the rest of it will fall into place, I imagine. Because it's the same with writing Lovecraft, isn't it? As long as you get the feel, the atmosphere, because that's the most important thing. As long as you get that right, then the rest of it will kind of fall into place, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the plan. And Conan's such a great character, right? Because he basically just takes no shit from anyone, and he will only think of what suits Conan best at any particular time, and it's quite refreshing, really. Where you know, to contrast, let's say with Lovecraft, where all the characters are fantastically inhibited and
painting left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
And over analytical. I mean, that's one of the beauties of Lovecraft as well. Yesterday I reread Mountains of Madness because I hadn't read it in a long time, and it is so wonderfully scientific and precise and logical that even when blind 6-foot-tall albino penguins turn up at the end, you're going, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whatever. But up to that point, he's led you along because it's like it's a report of a survey, and it's done in that sort of, you know, that reportage style. With such an emphasis on, you know, how much fuel the planes need to get from A to B and all of that. It's beautifully done. And that's why when, you know, first of all, you get the horrible penguins. Well, actually, before that, you get the barrel-shaped thingies. And then, but then the final thing, which only his friend, is it Danforth? He's the only one who sees it.
Yes.
And you think, okay, this has just been slowly escalating. It's like boiling a frog. You don't realize the water's boiling until suddenly you can't get out of it. And it's so well done. That was just my way of saying it's a huge contrast with Conan, because Conan basically just hits people with a sword.
He's going to hit it with an axe, right? Yeah. But then you get, you know, great stories like the Slithering Shadow, you know, Conan versus the Shoggoths kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it all works somehow. Different thing, but they all work.
Well, I think that's the beauty of the Cthulhu mythos generally, is that it can be applied to so many different not always successfully, but to so many different worlds, because there is something that the underlying truth of it, whether we like it or not, is that, the universe is indifferent and horrible things do happen. They may not necessarily be Shoggoths or Night Gaunts or whatever, but there's something out there that's just underlying everything, that if we actually ever glimpse this truth for more than a second, we would be driven irrevocably mad.
Yes, yeah. Was that idea of, was it going back to the new Dark Ages, isn't it, where we just shut down knowledge, which I know seems to be having some disturbing real life parallels at the moment.
Doesn't it?
I think that's called the internet shutting down knowledge. I could be wrong. But that's true. And also that I think something that Howard and Lovecraft both showed was the idea of civilizations in decline. And again, that's a recurrent theme, both of them. The Howard story Red Nails is a classic example of that wonderful city full of there's two warring factions in it who've just been at war for so long that they don't even quite remember why they're doing it, and you can just sense this decaying. It's decadent in the most literal sense, and that was something that could have been Innsmouth, for instance.
I mean, that's something they both share with Clark Ashton Smith, because I mean, a lot of his stuff is these once grand civilizations falling into complete and total ruin. And then, you hit the nail on the head. Innsmouth is basically the same thing. It was once a thriving seaport. It's now fallen into ruin. And I think that's one of the beauties of this kind of fiction, is you can apply it to pretty much anywhere, because we all know the town down the road that was once nice is now fallen into ruin. It's kind of universal, isn't it?
Well, I live in Eastbourne, and I've got to say our town centre is not what it was.
I know. I'm there quite often because my partner's from Eastbourne. Her mother's over in Eastbourne in the old town. So I'm in Eastbourne far often than I'd like to be, because I live in Brighton. So
well, there you go. Eastbourne is no longer. Well, it still is the place where people retire and die.
Yes,
but the town centre is one of those ones that suffered as a result of shops going, and then I think Brighton has sent quite a lot of their less desirable residents over here as well.
They're in Hastings.
Hastings is Innsmouth, actually, if you think.
It really is. I would say St Leonard's more so than St Leonard's more so than Hastings. Oh, blimey, that's a funny little place, that is.
For those who are not from the South Coast, this is all very this is very niche, but it's all true.
Yes, very, very true.
My main memory of Eastbourne is I had a friend who was the stage manager at the Devonshire Theatre many years ago.
Right.
So we used to go down there and visit quite a lot. And at one time we went down, The Woman in Black was being put on. So he got us tickets, of course. And I was sat on the aisle seat at the end, and he didn't tell me. She comes walking down the aisle. Man, I jumped so much.
Oh, nice. Gotcha.
That's a great moment on stage. Yeah. That's also great theatre to happen, because that's a decaying theatre. It's one of those, you can smell the sort of mustiness in the dust in the air, and the seats are all creaky and uncomfortable.
It is one of them that if you even move a fraction of an inch, everybody looks at you because it goes.
So I think it's interesting to me, because both Howard and Lovecraft, and not really Smith, which is something we've spoken about before, of course, in literary terms, they continue to grow in sort of comic book terms, in gaming terms. But cinematically, you struggle to find good adaptations of either of them. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
I do indeed. I wait for the day that someone does a proper Conan film, because a lot of people have great affection for the Arnold Schwarzenegger ones, but I remember watching the first one, by this point knowing Conan very well, and all my friends were like, this is great, this is going, and I was sitting there going, well, this has got nothing to do with the book whatsoever.
It's just like me.
And in that respect, I get a lot of shit for this, but I did enjoy the second one a lot more, because it was a lot truer, I felt. It was, and I think it was, if I'm right in thinking, Roy Thomas and some other comics writer both co-plotted it, both of whom had experience with Conan. So on paper, it looked more like a Conan story than the first film, for sure, but it didn't work out that way. I don't know what went wrong with it. And then the Jason Momoa one, I was disappointed by, because it gave Conan daddy issues.
Yes.
Where to even start with that one? Apparently they had a good story at first. It was a single script writer, and then it was rewritten by 11 people or something.
11? Oh, God, too many cooks. Yeah.
And it sounded like they wanted to reboot the original and chuck in a bit of this and a bit of that. And I thought it was a real mess.
By contrast, I really enjoyed the Solomon Kane film. I thought that was, again, gave him daddy issues. Please don't do that, Hollywood. It's a boring trope. We don't care. But I thought James Purefoy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Very good in the role, indeed. And they got a lot of things right about it. And I was just amazed it was made at all because barely anyone's heard of Solomon Kane.
Yeah.
But as for Lovecraft, it's a huge disappointment that is it Guillermo del Toro didn't wanted to make Mountains of Madness, and he might still be trying to make it for all we know. And I think he would do an amazing job of it if he was just allowed to go ahead and do it right.
I'm dubious. I am. Okay. After seeing Cabinet of Curiosities, I'm very, very dubious.
Okay. Well, he might try and contrive to have a love story between an albino penguin and one of the scientists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But there is, and I'm so annoyed because I haven't actually got it to hand. But there's a black and white Cthulhu story someone did not so long ago. You guys would probably know it better than I do. Can you remember what it's called? Was it called a Cthulhu?
Yeah.
It was Call of Cthulhu. They also did Whisperer in Darkness. It was the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society.
Yeah. And I thought that was beautifully done. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was spot on.
And the genius idea was to make it as a silent film, put it in the time that, because then you get away from you don't need CGI and all that stuff, right?
No, there's wonderful cardboard sets they used and things like that. It was.
They look stunning.
So again, thank you for reminding me of who did it and how, because I've watched it and I thought this is amazing. I have it on DVD somewhere as well, so I need to rewatch. And you told me they've done another one, so that's brilliant. I'm going to seek that out.
Yeah, that was really good as well. Yeah.
It's like a film noir, kind of like 1930s film noir with a biplane at the end, I think there was.
Yeah, there is a biplane in there, which another one, there's something about black and white and Lovecraft that I see that works for me, because I really liked the German adaptation of Colour Out of Space, Die Farbe.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, really good, because the only colour in it is the colour. The rest of it is black and white, but the colour has colour. It's and I thought that was a really, really good stylistic choice. I was like, ooh, that's clever. I like that.
I'd say the Nick Cage Colour Out of Space isn't bad either. I think they did a very good job with that.
It's all right. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that quite a lot. Chong stole it for me, though. His character, Tommy Chong, stole that film. But his character was spot on. That like Hunter S. Thompson-esque character in the caravan and the woods. He was brilliant.
and going back some as well, the Reanimator with Jeffrey Combs as well. I enjoyed that a great deal, and not very Lovecraftian. But then again, Herbert West Reanimator is a slight outlier in Lovecraft's canon anyway. Is this wonderful story of someone just trying and failing again and again to sort of do what he wants to do. But the it's a wonderful 80s sort of splatterfest, and I loved it for that.
Yeah, Stuart Gordon's movies I've always got a lot of affection for. From Beyond and Dagon. I liked his adaptation of Dreams of the Witch House they did for Masters of Horror as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't watch very much horror these days, but I understand there's been a lot of Lovecraftian influenced films have been coming out lately. And is there one called The Void? Am I right in thinking that's supposed to be very good?
Yes, The Void. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was pretty good.
That's
actually.
That
was all real time effects, wasn't it? There was no CGI in it.
Very similar to the effects in like Reanimator and things like that. It's
The Thing.
The Thing. Yeah, I really liked that. I'm a big fan of the works of Benson and Moorhead, because they've created a complete cosmic horror universe. It's cosmic horror rather than Lovecraftian. There's no mythos elements, but it is cosmic horror. You got Resolution, The Endless, Spring, and Synchronicity. They're really, really good. They all kind of overlap, and it's all very strange, and they just nail the atmosphere without referencing anything.
Yeah.
Which I think is, it's more of a Ligotti-esque approach, I guess, I would say.
Yeah, and in related things, I think Alan Moore has done a couple of very good Lovecraftians, the Neonomicon and Providence.
Yes.
Oh, God,
and he has, again, he sort of created an alternate universe. And I'm not sure, Neonomicon I enjoyed more than Providence, but Providence does lean very much into the sense of outsiderdom, that Lovecraft, who wanted to be a member of sort of polite society, but somehow never could fit in. I always feel that there's that sort of element about it. And Alan Moore tapped into that very well. I think, he's claimed to be influenced by Lovecraft quite a lot. But I think those two works particularly are just are extraordinary. There was reading Neonomicon is one of the few times I've actually been scared by a comic, and I was thinking, oh, I don't really want to look over my shoulder right now. Which is, comics don't normally scare you, because to have an image on a page, it's not like reading prose where the image is in your head, and yet somehow he managed to conjure up this really, I think it's the third issue. There's some really couple of creepy moments in it. So and I'm a massive Alan Moore fan anyway, but it was a great marriage of two styles.
I read an anthology of his last year. I think it's quite a new anthology, and he had a story set in Bedford, because obviously he lives in Northampton. I live just outside Bedford, and that was very creepy because it's places and you're familiar with.
Yeah,
but with that overlay on top, I was like, that sort of hit home quite hard to be that one. That was very interesting.
I guess that's why I've always found Ramsey Campbell's works affecting, because it's all set in Cheshire, where I grew up. So yeah, do you have any similar thing to where you're from, where you grew up, anything like that?
Well, I dived into a bit of it with Cthulhu Casebooks, because there's as we all know, Sherlock Holmes retired to Eastbourne, or near Eastbourne. So the third Cthulhu Casebook is set during his retirement years, and so I did play into that a bit. There are sort of local scenes and things. Yeah. But not. I mean, it's very hard to lay creepiness over Eastbourne. Let's say it's quite a genteel place. And although sometimes when the fog rolls in, it does get a bit. Well, it's more like John Carpenter's The Fog thing, just waiting for
shambling figures coming down the street.
Yeah. But for me, London, as we said, we're speaking earlier, London particularly seems to lend itself to, there's more going on. There seems to be more going on underneath London that could emerge, and Victorian London, particularly when it was all sort of, the Rookeries, the East End was basically somewhere you just did not go if you had any sense. And, the Thames just sort of creeping all the way through, and the Docklands. There seemed to be much more opportunity there to exploit the weirdness of a place. And to a certain extent, I think in the second Cthulhu Casebook, he goes to sort of the Essex marshes, I think, if Romney, I might be right.
Yes, Romney, yeah.
It's wild. And then again, a marshland, the whole of East Anglia, I've only ever visited, but there is something quite uncanny about such flat landscape and such huge skies overhead. You get a real sense of sort of how big the sky is when there's no hills in the way.
Yeah, I lived out that way for about 5 or 6 years, and seeing it all year round, it's quite a strange thing. One thing I remember is the sunsets at certain times of year were absolutely amazing, incredible orange and flaming red sky. But then you'd have whole days or weeks of just total flat greyness.
Yeah.
You used to look at your window and go, oh, very interesting place.
Well, that can be really oppressive, can't it? Just having a sort of monochrome sky and just nothing, you can barely see the sun through it.
Yeah, that was something growing up near the Peak District, how close it seems when it is like all glowering and dark. It feels like you can reach up and touch it. It's like it's trying to press you into the ground. It's really oppressive, when you're up there on the high peak and things like that. It's quite stunning in its own miserable way, I guess.
Bleak can be kind of stunning as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, not if you have to do it every day, but just a place I can visit every so often.
It's nice to visit, but I want to live there. Yeah.
Well, I did live there. It's no wonder I'm a goth.
So, I know every writer gets asked this, but do you have a particular process of writing? One thing I find, as I've sort of alluded to at the start, was I've been working on a novella for like 18 months or something, just getting the time to sit down and write. It just seems to be a challenge.
Well, I'm very fortunate in that I don't have another job, so I have absolute admiration for people who can do a full-time job and then write in their spare time, because I would just be, I'd be knackered. I wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm lucky. I try and get to my desk by about 8 o'clock every morning, get cracking, hopefully do 2,000, 3,000 words, and then go back over it and edit. And then by lunchtime, I'm usually done. And that's it. I then try and just go off and do something else, do something physical, because I've been sitting just using my brain, and it's great to just get out in the world and do, just be outdoors and do something, some activity. to counteract the sitting there all day and just being inside your head. So my process is I plot the book out, I make sure I've got the contract, and then once that's in place, then I just start. And by the end of it, I am a rewriter. I rewrite as I'm going along, but I don't redraft whole manuscripts from scratch. A lot of people will just like splurge and they create this sort of amorphous thing that they then lick into shape. And I'm much more sort of ploddy about it, one thing after another until I get to the end, and then I hand it in, and then it's ready for editing. There's no trick to it. It's just repetition and discipline's too strong a word, but just custom habit, really.
Right. Focus takes a certain amount of focus.
Well, my glib joke about that is that the focus is always the bills piling up on the left-hand side of my desk.
Yeah, that was my motivation.
Yeah. Like famously, Stephen King had the nail, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He had a nail where he put all those rejection letters, and the more he got, the more it inspired him to write something good.
That's kind of like the fuck you pile, It's just,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can just imagine him sitting there going, wankers, I'll show you.
That's like the shit list of people who end up in your books.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
A few years ago, I wrote a book and I wrote about Hastings Pier burning down. And about a week later, Hastings Pier burned down. Ooh. So I think, this power, I must step away from this power. I must never do that.
I was there that day. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I was there that day. I DJ'd in a club the night before, and I'd stayed in a bed and breakfast down on the seafront, down near the Carlisle. And I woke up in the morning, there's smoke coming out. I was like,
smoke on the water, man.
What the hell just happened?
Did you drop a match when you were there the night before or something like that?
Toss the fag casually over your shoulder.
Yeah.
I had another question as well. This is one of the big questions of life, right? How did they build the pyramids? Is there life on Mars? Why did they cancel Firefly?
Oh, yeah. That is one of the big questions.
And subsequently, of course, you've written, is it 8 or 9 Firefly novels?
4. Other people wrote the other 4.
Ah, right.
Yeah. Why they cancelled it, I don't know. I guess it was a very expensive show.
Yeah.
And it didn't get the ratings they were hoping for. And particularly because they showed the first 2 episodes out of order.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember that. They showed it out of order and then they moved it to a really strange time slot as well, didn't they?
Yeah. So, let's alienate people as quickly as possible by mucking around with the showings. Other than that, it's a mystery to me why it's cancelled, because I loved that show. I really did. It was one of the best things I think has ever been on TV. And the Serenity movie as well. I thought that was a very, very clever way of creating a standalone film that also tied up a lot of loose ends. And when what happened was Titan at one point asked me, are there any sort of properties you'd like to write in? And I jokingly said Firefly, because I didn't think there was possibly a cat's chance in hell that they would get that. And then a couple of years later, they got the license. And so I said, okay. And I had a wonderful time doing it. I really loved revisiting those characters, using the humor. I mean, the language and everything. The language is actually surprisingly easy to get because it was Victorian again. It was like, Holmes and Lovecraft. There's a sort of that elaborate use of speech and odd, strange words they would throw in like here and there. But mostly it is about those 9 characters and how they interact. And it was so beautifully done. I hopefully, when doing my professional fan fiction for Firefly, I was trying to, again, give people who loved the show just a little bit more of what they loved, staying as true as I could. We had the only stipulation was that everything had to be set between the show and Serenity, so we couldn't go into the future beyond Serenity. Certain characters, at least it means we could bring back certain characters who, spoiler alert, die in the film.
Yeah.
But it was a dream job. Again, I was very, very happy to be able to do that. And just to add just a little bit to mythology here and there.
Because again, I suppose that sort of setup gives you lots of scope in that they're visiting different planets and you can have a lot of different situations. Effectively you can change the setting every sort of episode.
Yeah, on paper it's a mad idea having cowboys in space because how does that work? How does that even come about? But the answer is just go with it and have, lean into both genres, lean into science fiction and Western. So I mean, one of the ones I did was basically a retelling of the Magnificent Seven, but with the Firefly cast instead.
Nice.
And I just thought, if you're going to steal from the best. I'm not a huge Western fan, but there's something very appealing about the way Firefly approached Westerns and took all the sort of the themes and tropes and turned them on their head and had fun with them. And this, who doesn't love a ramshackle crew of misfits who create a sort of weird found family together?
Yeah, I think that's why the Mandalorian series worked as well as it did, because it was basically a Sergio Leone Western.
Oh, right down to the music, absolutely.
Right down to the music and the shooting and the setup and everything. He was basically the man with no name.
Yes, yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And what wasn't Star Trek originally pitched as wagon train in space kind of thing?
Wagon trail,
yeah. Again, well, that's a very clever use of, because Westerns were hugely popular in the 60s when Star Trek was, emerging.
Oh, God, yeah.
That was a great hit. Yeah.
Rawhide.
Alias Smith and Jones. That might be slightly later, I don't know. But anyway, yeah. No, it was because it was very easy, a very cheap genre to fill, because you just go slightly outside Los Angeles and there you got your set.
Spahn Ranch.
Yeah, I was going to say Spahn Ranch. Yeah. Famously, it was, wasn't it? It was a Western set.
So I suppose the other obligatory question we have to ask any Holmesian author is, who's your favourite Sherlock?
Oh, it's easy. Jeremy Brett.
Oh, yes, same.
It's a Doctor Who question. Who's your favourite Doctor Who? The one you liked when you were young. So in my case, I'm old enough. It's John Pertwee / Paper.
Yeah, Pertwee for me. Yeah.
But with even if I were being objective about it, I didn't hate the Benedict Cumberbatch series. I thought it was good until it disappeared up its own arse.
Thank you. That's exactly what I keep saying about it. It started off great and then rapidly went up its own rectum.
Absolutely. For me, it was when Mary Watson turns out to be a secret agent, and then they didn't resolve the Reichenbach fall thing and all of that. Anyway, let's not get into that because that's a whole nother rabbit hole to get down. And Basil Rathbone, again, a very good Holmes, totally let down by Nigel Bruce's Watson as this bumbling idiot.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there, the sweet spot, Jeremy Brett, perfect casting, haughty, arrogant, but you sense beneath it there was the beating heart of someone who wanted to do well. And Edward Hardwicke as Watson, perfect pairing. So I know there's a different Watson in the first series, but once they got into their groove, it couldn't have been better. And it was just a huge shame that you can watch the later episodes so you can see how unwell Brett is.
Yes.
And he's struggling.
Yeah.
And you just really wish he could just carry on and they could have just filmed the entire canon. They made a good stab at it, but definitely Jeremy Brett. When I'm writing Holmes' dialogue, I always try and hear Jeremy Brett saying it.
Oh, his delivery was perfect, wasn't it? And like you say, that kind of arrogance at times, but then there was always that little flash of a smile, especially at some urchin or Mrs. Hudson or something. He didn't really mean it,
Yeah. Or some little florid hand gesture he'd do as well. You just think, this man is actually a little bit mad, but also benevolent.
Yeah.
I always liked that laugh that he did, that single ha.
Yes.
It was more of an ejaculation than an actual laugh, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's like he almost surprised himself by finding something funny.
Indeed, yeah.
So just to wrap up then, perhaps you could tell us about some of your other works as well. Say you've got a huge amount of books out of his sci-fi, the Pantheon series, and children's books as well.
I've written for teenagers as well. I'm a jobbing writer, and if someone suggests I should try and do something for them, I will try and give them what they want. So I've tried all different things, and that may seem to some people that I don't have any kind of fixed idea of what I want to be. But for me, it's more like, why not give it a go? See what else, see what other genres and styles I can turn my hand to. And I've been doing a couple of Marvel books recently as well, just adapting classic Marvel into prose, which it's a childhood dream come true job.
That's cool.
Been loving doing that, and I've got a couple more things coming up, but I'm not allowed to talk about either of them because they're still a bit hush hush, secret squirrel. So yeah, my next book out is a retelling of the Galactus story from the Fantastic Four, the Lee Kirby stories from the mid-60s, I think.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it was great.
Nice.
It was a great gig. I mean, it was one of those ones where I'm going, who the hell am I to try and, retell this story? And the answer was, well, why not? Because it's only 2.5 issues long. So it's not a massive epic. And it'd be much more fun to sort of turn it into and use the characters, turn it into this bigger story while keeping absolutely true to the original beats in those comics. Lee and Kirby did an amazing job, but there's more that you can accrete around it to make it more interesting. And it's coming out just in time for the Fantastic Four film in July.
Ah, nice.
I think as well, I mean, looking back, especially even the old sort of Spider-Man comics and all that sort of stuff, they're a lot more sophisticated. There's a lot more depth in them than people probably gave them credit for at the time. It often sort of dismissed, didn't they? It's just comics,
I think that was why Marvel took off so much, because they certainly they were writing. Their characters had problems. They had hang-ups. They had issues. They didn't always win, and a lot of readers could relate to that. And then once the college crowd got in on it and realized that these weren't comics written just for children, I think that's when Marvel took off and overtook DC, whose characters were still a bit old-fashioned and stuck in the sort of 1950s. Yeah. And Marvel was it must have been incredibly exciting for young people to be reading at that time. And I think that was the beauty of it. It was combining soap operatic elements with superheroic elements, and it worked a treat.
Yeah, I've always found there's a lot more shades of grey with Marvel rather than DC.
Yeah. Well, that's the DC, you have the Justice League calling each other chum all the time and stuff like that. And by comparison, you have the Avengers just like being at each other's throats all the time.
Yeah, and, it's more realistic, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. No, that was, again, a huge formative influence on my early writing, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. Stan Lee was a man very happy to use long words. I remember asking my father what idiosyncrasies means, and he's going, well, where do you get that from? And I said, well, it's from Dr. Octopus says it to Spider-Man in this comic I've just been reading.
Nice.
And good on you, Stan Lee. You're not writing down to anyone.
Well, I hear Mr. Sargent is pulling up in the bus outside, so the time is approaching where we have to depart from Innsmouth. Tim and I depart. James gets to stay here overnight, of course, as all of our guests do. Most of them make it. That's the good news.
I'm a little bit frightened now. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to get out of this place. The fog is closing in, and there's lots of people waiting outside.
I'm sure you can apply some Holmesian logic here and logic your way.
Just find your way to the railway line, you'll be all right. Just faint and hide in a bush until morning. It seems to work for people.
I suspect when I get back home, I'll look in the mirror and find that my face is not what it used to be.
It happens to the best of us. You can't see the makeup is covering the gills and all that.
High collars. You have to buy a lot of high collars.
So just as a last question then, again, something we ask a lot of our guests, could you pick a favourite Lovecraft story, one by Lovecraft himself, and do you have a favourite non-Lovecraft mythos story as well?
For the second, I can't really say because I haven't read a huge amount of non-Lovecraft. I mean, I would say A Study in Emerald is a very, very clever way of incorporating, there's a wonderful twist in it, which I won't spoil for people who haven't read it. But beyond that, and I would probably say Alan Moore as well, the Neonomicon and Providence. As for Lovecraft himself, I would argue Mountains of Madness, I think, is probably his best. It's the purest distillation of all the ideas. There's a lot of sort of background as well, and a lot of his idea about how civilization might have evolved or devolved. I also like Rats in the Walls because it's very much a Poe story, and he was hugely influenced by Poe. And Call of Cthulhu is also quite nice, especially because they try and kill Cthulhu with a steamship at the end, which is just that's a ballsy move.
That's a steampunk versus Cthulhu, isn't it?
Yeah. Full steam ahead. You can just imagine the
and it just kind of squidges into him, and then he just sort of reforms afterwards as well. It's so yeah. I think those would be my choice.
I think that as well is a form of detective story, isn't it? Really, I mean, you could almost drop Holmes in that, the way it's structured.
Well, Legrasse has become an occult detective in his own right because C.J. Henderson has written several stories involving Inspector Legrasse that follow on from Call of Cthulhu. So that's become its own little offshoot of its own now. That's one of the beauties of it, I think.
You've given me something else to investigate now. I need to start writing all these things down.
Oh, you mentioned Carnacki earlier as well. Any chance of some new Carnacki stories?
I don't know. The thing is, I think Carnacki is a bit too niche. I'm not sure that many people have heard of him. The lovely thing about Carnacki is you can never tell if it's going to be supernatural or Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, like the Horse of the Invisible and things like that.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm not sure I would attempt that just because because there were only about a dozen stories written as well, weren't there? He didn't do too many.
Yeah, there weren't that many actually, were there?
Yeah, it was about a dozen. Yeah.
So he's quite hard to get a fix on, but I do love them though. They are excellent.
Yeah, because I know William Michael's written quite a few Carnacki stories and things. Yeah, even I've done a Carnacki story. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's a crossover with my Eugene Angove character. Yeah.
Which way did you go then? Was it supernatural or was it Scooby-Doo?
It was Cthulhu Mythos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for coming in, James. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And needless to say, we highly recommend the Cthulhu Casebook series and all your other works as well. I've read the first Firefly one. I'm going to get back into those. In fact, I think I'm going to watch the series again. It's been quite a while since I watched that.
Yeah, it's been years. I've got the DVDs somewhere. I'll have to dig them out.
Yeah, I think I've got them on Blu-ray as well because I think I had them on DVD and then sort of thought, well, I'm going to upgrade these because why not? And then I haven't watched them since. But I'd love to go back and revisit those as well.
And if people want to get in touch with you or see your work, what's the best place to do that?
I do have a website, jameslovegrove.com. I don't update it as much as I should do. Otherwise, I am on Facebook and on Twitter /X, whatever we're calling it. Those two particular hellscapes, which are Lovecraftian in a way. And all books are available in all good bookshops and online retailers as well.
Yeah. I don't think I've talked to a single author or know a single author who updates their website.
I'm delighted to hear that because I often get told off for not doing it.
I haven't done mine in about a year.
We're too busy being creative, love. That's what it is.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's the way. And I barely do anything on Twitter either these days because I don't even know why. I was told to join it a few years ago and absolutely despise the place. So I just, Facebook, chatting with friends, yes. Twitter, forget it.
Yeah, it's toxic. It is toxic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I don't do Instagram because I'm not a 15-year-old girl.
Yeah, same. I've got an Instagram, but I don't think I've made a single post. I only did it because my publisher kept moaning at me that I didn't have one.
What you need is just need 1 million followers and then you'll get a book deal straight away. I don't get it. And TikTok is even more incomprehensible to me.
No.
I keep saying to my sons, can you do a book talk for me? And they go, no, fuck off, Dad.
Brilliant.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure.
You're more than welcome. I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe we have one letter in the mailbag today, sir.
Indeed we do. Yeah, it's discussing our last episode, which was our interview with Christopher Michael. It's come from YouTube and it's from Aaron Vleck. A few years ago, the ubiquitous Florida man was apprehended while eating another man's face while lying in the middle of a freeway. I believe bath salts had an important role to play.
Oh, that is grim, isn't it? Bath salts. I remember that. That was a thing, wasn't it? A couple of years ago. People off their nut.
Yeah, it was the same time people were snorting plant fertilizer as well, weren't they? It was just like...
That sounds like it should be a sort of Swamp Thing side plot or something.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. This is really very strange.
Okay, well, just time to welcome a couple of new patrons to the show. That's Mitch Keith and Jacob King. Thanks very much for signing up to support us. And of course, if you want to join our merry throng of patrons, do check out our Patreon page. When you sign up, you get access to our bonus content. You get a quarterly copy of Innsmouth News PDF. And of course, you get free entry to any events we put on, such as the Innsmouth Literary Festival. Speaking of bonus content, I believe we've got a bonus episode coming up next time, sir.
Indeed, next time we're going to be doing our 6th delve into the fungi from Yuggoth's sonnet cycle. So yeah, expect lots of other random diversions and offshoots and things that come from that.
That's what we do best. That's what
Indeed,
we do best.
indeed.
All right, on that note, thanks for listening, folks. Thanks again to James for dropping by. And with that, it's goodbye from me, Rob Huyton.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.